Hey, welcome to Welly's World. I'm Matt Wellman. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about coming up with a product, starting your project and doing what you want to do, what makes you excited, what you're passionate about. And in this case, we're always talking about music on this channel. I've done a lot of spinning my wheels in the past because I wasn't really sure how to get started with something or where to take it after I had even created something that I was proud of. So in the interest of finding some way for you to do better than me, I think it's important to talk about where to go once you've started. So is anytime you start a new project, and when I say project, I really mean something that's a creative endeavor that you are making yourself and you're going to try to sell to a group of people, to a venue, or just something that you like, you feel like it represents you in some way. So the first thing is, in music and composition, you want to know what it is that you're trying to break into. So say you're a composer and you like playing guitar. Usually you're going to fall into the rock genre. You're going to want to play rock and roll. So if you want to play rock and roll, you have to know what that means. What is rock and roll? You really have to know what you're getting yourself into. To make it simpler, if you wanted to play the blues, there's a very specific form that has a very specific chord progression that really doesn't deviate a whole lot. So if you're playing, the blues, you would know who someone like Stevie Ray Vaughan is, who's playing. You would really be kind of well-versed, ideally, in what that means to play the blues so that you could put your own type of stamp on top of it. So if you're interested in something like what Taylor Swift does, some more of like the pop country scene, maybe you're into something more modern than what we would consider just typical blues. You would really want to listen to your favorite bands. It's why we say a lot of times in music, who were your influences, because it really speaks to why your music sounds the way it does. So for me, for example, when I first started playing, the first band I ever loved was Nirvana. So when I was 14, me and a group of my buddies, we all played in a Nirvana cover band. So of course, any music that we tried to write ourselves sounded like Nirvana, which isn't a bad thing. It's okay to emulate the people that you want to be like. And when you're starting out, you have no other frame of reference. It's not like you've listened to thousands of bands and music throughout the ages to understand what's been done and what hasn't been done. You don't really have to worry about that. You want to just get started. You want to accept what you love and take that music that you're trying to create yourself, and it's okay to sound like those bands. So anything that I wrote from 14 to 16 sounded like Nirvana. Now I was a bass player too, so everything I did was very it was very much like power chord rock, and it really just sounded like a bass line with power chords, which is kind of what Nirvana sounds like for the most part. As I got older, I got into more complicated music. I started to listen to heavy metal. In high school, my favorite band was Metallica, so I started to really get into more technical aspects. I remember the first Metallica song I ever learned was Nothing Else Matters, which starts out with this really nice finger picking pattern that I had never heard on the guitar before. It sounded almost like they were playing the piano on this stringed instrument. And as a 15, 16-year-old kid, I thought that was the coolest thing ever. So when I actually started to get serious about guitar and started playing that, it really kept my interest, which is the next thing, is make sure that what you're getting into is going to keep your interest. Whenever you get into a self-fulfilling project, and what I mean by that is something that the only person that can complete it is you, the only way you're going to finish it is if you're passionate about it. If you're not passionate about it, you're going to peter out, you're going to decide to do something else, and it's just not going to be your top priority. There's been plenty of times in my adult life where there was a time I lived in Las Vegas and I was working 4 jobs, and I would get home from one job. I'd have an hour of time in between when I needed to be in my next job, and I would sit down and I would be working on whatever project I had going on, whether it was music, whether it was writing, but it was kind of this constant work. Even when I was trying to put food on my table, in any kind of spare time I had, I was working on a project. So make sure you're passionate about it. Now, that's not to say that, you might be really into DJing, which is gaining huge popularity right now. That's something I don't know anything about that. But like I said, music or not, you want to make sure that you're passionate about it. When it comes to music, you're always giving yourself. There's going to be some words involved, and especially like my first example was rock and roll. You're going to have some lyrics that's going to go along with that, and usually those lyrics are inspired by something. I have behind me, I have just notebooks and notebooks full of song lyrics that probably will never see the light of day. Some of them will, and some of them won't, because just the act of writing them down was, in a sense, me saying something about that time in my life that I needed to say. And now some of them, like I said, some of them go along with some music, some of them don't. But what's important is when you're working on a musical project, you've got to know what you're trying to say. So the music, as we've talked about in my classes, we've talked about music itself affects your emotions very strongly. And so you want usually the emotion to match up with what you're trying to say with your words. Now, that's not always the case. We listen to, say Bad Moon Rising. Bad Moon Rising has this really nice, kind of happy, cheerful chord progression with these really kind of depressing lyrics. But I think that's what he was going for when he wrote that. You want to think about what you're going for when you're creating your project, because it is, in a sense, it's your art, not someone else's. And it's important that you know what you're trying to say. And in the end, whatever you do, you're putting on the market for someone, or you're putting it on the market for you, and you're hoping that someone's going to buy it. So you're always marketing that product, and you want to understand the audience that it's intended for. So before you can even get it to market, though, you want to think about, usually when you're going to write a song, it'll probably go through 5, 6, 7 drafts. Your teachers at school probably usually want a first draft of your essay before they expect this kind of more polished product at the end. The same thing's true for a song. You want to be able to go through and have a rough idea of what the song's going to sound like, what instrumentation you want, the parts of it the parts of it that you want, again, going back to form, you want to make sure that it's, you're playing chorus or verse, bridge, chorus, if that's what you're going for. Or if you just have this one long poetic verse that has, weird chord progressions going on in the background, you want to have that set way in advance. So the best way to get from the first draft to the final draft is to make sure you get a lot of feedback. Now, feedback's not always easy to get because, in my experience, your friends and your family aren't necessarily going to be the first people who want to listen to your music. And by the same stroke, they might not be the first people that you want to hear your music because they might be the most important people to you. So criticism from them might be hurtful in the really early stages. One thing that I used to do with one of my bands is we would go to open mic night. And we'd play a new song at open mic night, see how it was received. We'd always go and talk to the people who were there, see what they thought, see how they felt. Because again, especially if you're out at a gig, you want to see people dancing. You want to see people groove into what you're doing. So that was an open mic night was a great place to see other musicians. And if you don't know, an open mic night is something that you can find in big cities. There's usually just places where you can go. There's usually boards somewhere. You can find it on the internet by searching open mic night around your area. And those are good places to go to kind of test out new material. So we'd get feedback from those people. Sometimes people don't want to talk to you, but a lot of times if you're nice, musicians want to be nice back because they're usually there for the same reason. They want feedback on what they're doing. So getting feedback, both positive if people liked it and negative if people think you could do something better, is really important. Now, the first thing that I always thought of going to an open mic night is, oh God, what if everybody hated it and it was awful and we've done all this work and it was just nobody liked it? Well, that's not usually the case. Usually someone's going to say, what were you going for? If they give you negative feedback, it might be, well, I didn't really get that. Maybe if you did this differently, it would be more effective for me. It's very rare in a voluntary interaction between people that someone's going to tell you that you suck. Frankly, if you're just talking with someone and you're trying to get feedback from them on something that you've done, they're generally really positive and want to help. Like I said, nobody's going to come up to you and tell you that you suck, especially when you put yourself out there, in my experience, unless you actually did really, really well. The only time I've ever been really, really criticized for something I've done where I put myself out there was when there was a huge response to people really liked it. And then I'd have a couple people who would come in and really try and rain on that parade and say, no, this was really bad and you're bad and you should feel bad. But then at that point, you kind of understand that there's something else going on there. Yeah, sure, you could make your product better, but if someone just comes and tells you you're bad, that's not getting feedback. That's someone being a jerk, basically. So it's important when you go out there to know that the feedback that you're going to get is not an attack on you, and it almost never will be. The second thing about getting feedback is to take compliments gracefully. And this was something I always struggled with, is if someone comes and says, hey, that was really great. I loved this and this and this. I just wanted to tell you that I really enjoyed the performance. When I was young, I used to kind of blow that off like, okay. Frankly, because I was uncomfortable. But as I got older, I realized how genuine that is, especially being a fan myself. When I would go see groups or performers that I really liked. I remember in college there's a classical guitarist by the name of Elliot Fisk, who I've seen quite a few times now, And I remember seeing him and getting to go and meet him and being completely starstruck meeting this guy who is a total normal human being, but because he plays music in a fashion that really affects me emotionally, he was somehow this superhuman. And when I kind of noticed this happening to me, to someone else, I realized that a lot of the positive feedback that I would get from other people was really coming from a genuine place. And even though I might not have felt that I gave the best performance of my life, it was beneficial for someone, or someone enjoyed it. And frankly, I mean, that's why I wanted to be a musician in the first place. So it really sucked as a young performer to get positive feedback and not be able to enjoy it. So it's really important to, again, realize that you're not going to get crushingly bad feedback unless someone's trying to hurt you, which is, you don't want their feedback to begin with. And accept positive feedback gracefully, because it really is important not only to accept someone's feedback of you because they're really trying to pay you a compliment, but also because that's what we do this for the most part. That's why I do it, is because I want to affect people positively and connect with them on some ways. So I love it when I get to talk to people after I perform, even if it's just like bowing in humility and just thanking them. You might not have a lot in common with them to have a lot of words to say, but just that interaction is really positive. So say you've gotten lots of feedback, you've gone through, you've changed some things. Maybe you've had to go through and tweak some words that weren't really making sense. Your form is really complete. Your transitions sound really good. If you're playing with a band, the band is really tight. Everyone's playing, they know the song really well now. And so kind of the final point here is to take this project out to the market, which you've kind of already started to do by taking it to open mic night, and getting feedback in that regard. Is you have to now take this and put it out into the world, because no project exists until you put it out into the real world, no matter how much work you put into it. You might have a 500,000 word novel manuscript that sits in your office drawer. I mean, it might as well just not exist. Nobody's seen it. You haven't tried to do anything with it. It might be your baby. It might be your only love, but nobody's seen it. And that's something that a lot of artists struggle with. Musicians, visual artists, and authors struggle with a lot, is just being able to take the criticism that you've had, to take the effort that you've put into your product and put it out into the world. And that could mean, booking a show for yourself. That could mean putting the song on YouTube. That could mean, trying to get more serious connections, and I don't mean more serious, but more traditional paths where you're looking for a record deal, which is a lot more involved. But once you start taking it out there, it doesn't just magically become a big deal. It takes a lot of time. It takes people to hear it, and people don't just hear it overnight. Even though the internet's this amazing, wonderful thing where I'm going to put up this YouTube video at midnight, and then by morning when I wake up, I'm going to have 1 million views. That's insanely rare. This is the kind of thing where you're going to put it up, and for the first 2 years, your entire channel might only see 1,000 hits. But then the next year, maybe you see 5,000, and then the year after that you see 8,000, and then the year after that you see 10,000. And so if you see progress in what you're doing, if you see that you're reaching more people, that's how you know that you're finding your audience. And obviously the more you do it, the more people that you're going to attract with that like-mindedness as far as the art that you enjoy. And then what's great about the internet finally is that you can actually connect with those people. If you put a product out and people hear it and they say, man, this is so great, you can say, thanks, I really appreciate that you liked it. And maybe even have a dialogue, especially when you have a small following, you can actually talk to people. Whereas, a lot of people who've been doing this for a long time, they might have, some of the people I follow have, 250,000 subscribers. They can't interact with those people on a one-on-one basis. But especially when you're starting out, really enjoy that interaction that you can have with people, because it's building your audience, and you're creating, just like a business, you're creating repeat customers. So when you put another project out, they're going to be there to listen to it. And frankly, business, music, art, anything in life, if you build it, they will come, we say, field of dreams type of thing. But more than that, if it's not for the people who listen, who is it for? Because it is for you as the artist to create, because you're giving a part of yourself to make that happen. But it's also, you're doing it for someone else. You really are, in a lot of ways, doing it for the audience. So making sure that they're appreciated is so important. It's so important. So these are just a couple of thoughts I had about trying to start a project. These aren't the kind of projects that you get in school where your teacher says, okay, now we've been learning this all year and now it's up to you. Why don't you try something like this on your own? No, this is something that you internally say, this is something I want to do. And maybe I don't know how to do it, but something pushes you forward to try to do it. And I hope that this, in some small way, is able to give you a push in the right direction. So I'm Matt Wellman. Thanks for watching Welly's World. I really appreciate it.